Toby Island and Helen Reef means a lot to me. And when I go down there and visit and see changes, it really affects us. We heard a lot of good things about Helen Reef, and then we're proud to be part of that good story because we're from there. Helen Reef, Toby, that's almost like the identity that we're going to stand for.
And it's a very peaceful island. There's so many things that is completely different from here. You don't have electricity, you don't have to get on a car to fight the traffic like in Koror. The time is yours. You can pick up your fishing pole, go out to the reefs and fish, or get on a boat and go out and troll.
I was raised from there. I have heart to stay on that island. It's very beautiful place. At night when it's full moon or all the kids are playing on the beach, their parents came down and joined them.
While we live in two different places, we are still one. We are the people of Toby. We belong to these remote islands in the Republic of Palau. So Toby is about 200, 300 miles southwest of the main islands of Palau. Toby is the main island where the people of Toby live. East of Toby is where Helen Reef Island is located, about 40 miles.
It's about a mile long and half mile wide. Fringe Reef. Next to it is a Helen Reef with a lagoon, about 17 miles long and 8 miles wide. The first people came to Hatohobei came from the outer island of Yap. They say that it's about 400 or 500 years ago, or maybe more.
The population of all the community members will be about 200 to 300 people, but only about 30 people live on the island.
In the 80s, most of the Tobians moved here to Koror to seek jobs and healthcare and schools. However, during the summer, most of us return to Toby to visit our families.
I had the opportunity to grow up on Toby when I was younger. I noticed that the community were self-sufficient, that they were able to provide, for their daily living. They had depended a lot on the land and the ocean.
During those times, there were a lot of resources. So many sea cucumber, giant clams, troco shell, a lot of fish.
Pacharigi is the local name for Helen Reef. Pacharigi in our own language means reef of giant clams. The local gave this name because when they first discovered this island, clams were so abandoned that they claimed the clams were everywhere, that they live on top of each other clams.
But after the Indonesian raided the island, the resources, it came to nothing.
A lot of the fishing that's happening were no longer on offshore, fishing from the deeper ocean. They were moving on to the reef, and the fishermen that came were different fishermen. They were mostly from our neighboring countries. That worried the community, that they were not just coming in many numbers, but they were also dynamiting, using big nets, and all these other fishing practices to try and get as much as they can, as fast as they can. And so our community is concerned that now they're intruding into our food resource, what we really need to sustain our community and our children that are coming.
I'm with one of those hundreds of people in Toby who feel not good about it. The fact that they just intrude into our space and get what they want without any regards as to who owns this thing.
And so when we try to tell them not to come, that they're not allowed to fish, our community were scared. They were worried. They feared them because of their number. In fact, there were numbers of boats will come in dirty boats. and each boat will have about 15 to 20 crew. So they outnumber the islanders, the community members. And so that's why the community is very concerned that they own this place, yet they cannot tell these fishermen who are not welcome that you cannot fish here. The community members felt that while they own Helen Reef, they can't do anything about this problem. So they don't really own it. It's an idea that they own this reef, but other people are really utilizing the resource. And this concerned the community members because they realized that their future is going to be gone if this continues. So the community tried to do something about it. When we first started to address the problem of illegal fishing in our waters, we realized that the community members have no knowledge of what to do.
Some people didn't think that it's possible to have Helen Reef as a conservation area because they think that it's too far away, too expensive. But we never gave up. We went out and asked people to help us. And we get together and had a meeting. We plan it out, and then the ball started to roll.
We talked with the community about what their highest priority was, and they said they wanted no illegal fishing to happen in that reef. They wanted basically the reef to only be for the community members. Well, in order to have no illegal fishing, you have to have 100% enforcement. You have to have enforcement around the clock. So we essentially help them make a plan, raise money, and go out and get the resources and the training they need to set up enforcement. And that started in about 2000. Our first grant was, I think, $2,000 from the University of Hawaii. And then after that, it just started rolling. Slowly we got small grants, small grants, small grants, and eventually we raised enough money that they could protect the reef.
And so the community met and we developed a plan that became the basic foundation of the work that we have done over the last 15 years. Our community was able to use that plan and seek outside assistance. They were able to use that plan to communicate to government partners. They were able to use this plan to also seek financial and technical resources. They were able to use this plan to also communicate amongst themselves. But more important, they were able to check some of the things that they said they were going to do, that they have done, that works slowly towards addressing the bigger problem.
There's always 4 officers down there at all times. They have safety equipment. They have training by the National Police Academy of Palau. They have firearms training. They have radar. They have radios that allow them to constantly be in contact with the home base in Koror. And they essentially have achieved their objective. And since then, they've been continually maintaining an enforcement system that allows them to constantly protect that reef.
Our main job on Helen is to monitor the illegal fishing vessel and protect the natural resources there. When we see an illegal fishing vessel, we log the information and report it back to the main office in Koror. As soon as the main office gets this information, they report it to the National Patrol Boat for response.
They'll go down and then they'll catch them maybe far from, maybe a couple of miles away from the reef.
They board the vessel and confiscate everything, the fishing gears, and take evidence, arrest, and bring them back to Koror.
So one of the things that our community did was that we developed a long-term management plan. This plan is dedicated at looking at ways we can utilize the resources of Helen Reef, at the same time keep the poachers out.
How we manage the reef is we divide it in 2 parts. The one close to the islands, we open it up for fishing, for subsistence, and for whatever the people need. On the southern part, from the big wreck all the way to the end of the reef, it's a no-take zone. And that's where the spawning aggregation is, near the channel.
One of the things that I think our community has been brave in doing is that we agreed that 70% of the reef will be closed. It's a no-take area. Community members and visitors are not allowed to fish there. The reason being was that when we first started the program, the conservation work at Helen Reef, we found that it was heavily overfished, and we want to see it replenish itself. And then our community can continue to reap the benefits, continue to harvest the resources, at the same time making sure that we're sustainably utilizing them and that we're not damaging, the resources, that the future can continue to enjoy it. Overfishing and poaching on our islands is no longer a problem today. It's an issue of the past.
A few years ago, we solved these poaching problems with the help of marine law. And over a period of time from 1999 till this year or last year, things really changed. The resources are coming back. At one time last year, I went out on snorkeling on the reef and I saw clams almost everywhere. At one point, I saw trochus shell. They're very close to each other. There's a small ones, that means they're spawning. And we went down there on one of the field trip, we went out fishing. Sharks were everywhere. That's a good sign because the project is working, everything is coming back.
My name is Lourdes Isal. I'm a researcher here at the Palau International Coral Reef Center. We do work surveying protected areas around the region, including Helen Reef. And Helen Reef is a very special story because there is some recovery at Helen, and this recovery is very dramatic. And we see this in not only the coral cover. The coral cover went up by about 25%, but the amazing story was the fish. The fish densities in Helen is the highest in Micronesia. It's almost double the regional average. So it's a very special story in terms of how protected areas can recover after major events like bleaching, and how protected areas can really help in terms of reseeding whatever the remaining reefs that have been affected by climate change.
The reef today is flourishing, and when we see other climate change impacts, I feel very confident that that reef will be able to withstand them and will recover really well.
This is a great message to our community, that our efforts are paid off. It's an issue of the past. Today, our community is facing newer problems. Problems of coastal erosion, sea level rise. We're worried on where is our community gonna go? With the ocean rising, what can we do to address this newer problem?
Because of the changes in climate change, we have to change our way of living.
I can say that our community is now ready and prepared. We're brave, having gone through this big problem that in the beginning we thought we will never be able to address. We are ready to address bigger problems on climate change. In fact, at the moment, our community is already working with the Women's Association, the state government, and other partners to see how we can address the issue of droughts. Our government has worked with other partners to bring resources to build new water catchment tanks. These are resources that, are scarce on our island because we know the ocean is gonna rise. It's gonna come into our taro pads. It's gonna come into our water, our groundwater. And so we have to have a backup. Working out in these remote places, we need to have a backup of a backup. And so our water catchment system is now more than enough. It's enough to supply the community out there for a long drought. We are ready to undertake this problem of climate change. We've been able to work with the Women's Association to recultivate our taro pads, put in salt-tolerant taros that can thrive and survive in our taro patches in the event that salt water gets into the taro patch. We're working on ways to diversify our food source by planting more fruit crops.
The island is so small now that sometimes when it's king tide, the tide goes from one side to the other. To prepare themselves for those kind of things, they have built their house higher, you know, like 2 stories. That's the first 2-story building in the Southwest Islands. But, you know, they're preparing themselves for the high tides.
So today, our community is doing something to address some of these issues or impacts that we're seeing on climate change. Yes, we are living the story of climate change. But the one thing that I can say that continues to be a problem is this coastal erosion. A big chunk of our island is getting washed away every day. So the focus of our community program today is very different from 15 years ago when we first started. Today, our community members are interested in knowing what can we do to address the issue of climate change. Because the coastal erosion is so big, that the island is moving so rapidly, and the community is very concerned whether our islands will still be there someday for our children.
The erosion is the big problem we have. The island changes from year to year, but it's getting smaller and smaller. It's more narrower and more shorter.
And it's really fast this time. We've talked to the elders, and they said, yes, it happens before, but it's not as fast as it is right now. So yes, we prepare ourselves, but the speed that it's taking to wash out the land is faster than what we expected.
This remains to be our biggest problem today. And our community is now adjusting our plans, refocusing our strategies on how we can focus more on addressing the issue of coastal erosion and providing a better solution to how the community can benefit more from these resources.
Today, most of us Tobians live in a small village in Koror called Eang.
So in moving to Koror, we're realizing that we are now living in a very different environment, and we need to adapt to this different environment. At the same time, we're looking at ways we could keep the community cohesiveness, the togetherness that helps us sustain our culture and our language. And so over the last few years, with the efforts of trying to protect their community resource out at Helen and on Toby, the community has created a nonprofit organization that is really working to bring the community together, to seek ways we can bring resources to support the dream of the community. And with that, the creation of this local nonprofit, Hope, has allowed us to also do other initiatives to support our youth and trying to maintain a strong cohesion by creating or building this basketball court so that they have a place where they can come together, learn from one another, and grow together as a community. The community over the last 15, 16 years has worked so hard to build a church, and this is one place where we can all be united as children of God. When we first started this initiative, the community members did not really all agree. They know it's a problem, but they don't know how to address it. They don't know what we can do to deal with the problem. And so it was difficult to unite the community. But having one plan allowed us to unite ourselves. Now we can communicate with one voice. And also having, in the beginning when we organized what we call the Helen Reef Action Committee, this committee was able to lead the discussions in the community, to face the partners that were willing to help us, to reach out to outside for assistance. And so this allowed us to step outside of what we would normally call, we can't do it, to saying, yes, we can.
So I always tell other communities around the Pacific, you can learn from what has happened in Hatohobei, that this small community set an objective for themselves. It was ambitious, but it was within their means, as long as they had help from outside folks, and they remained committed, and they achieved it. And now they're setting new objectives for themselves to deal with climate change and other resource issues. It's inspiring. Basically, if a group of 300 community members could protect a reef that's so remote, then you can achieve anything in terms of conservation.
It's the commitment and the feel of belonging. They feel that Helen Reef belongs to them, and they're committed to protect it. For 6 months, they didn't get paid. We were able to get some donation for food and other things for the rangers. But the people who work in the office and the people, they didn't get any salary, but they still work. They keep on coming to work every day. They do their report every day. And I think that's a commitment. And I think that's what holds them together.
You can't really protect a place for a long time unless your heart is in it. We are happy to hand this to our children and share the lessons that we've learned so that they continue to be steward to the ocean.
Our success is really the community owning this problem. This is the success of our community in addressing the overfishing problem, is because we took ownership of it. We agree that, this is our resource. This is our future. This is our children's future. And therefore, we cannot sit around and wait for outside help to come and find us. We need to go out there and get the help we need. And so our community focused a lot on trying to unite ourselves. And in uniting ourselves, we had to organize, figure out ways we can communicate, provide a forum where people can bring ideas, at the same time develop our skills as community leaders, and focusing on leading this effort and communicating it with the outside world so that we can get the help we need. And so, yes, we will continue to pray as a community, but we will take action. We will continue with our leadership, united in our efforts, and to address this climate change problem. And we hope that someday our community can continue to thrive on these remote islands in the southwest parts of Palau.